Tonight on Greater Boston, I'm Sue O'Connell in for Jim Browdy. The Russian Olympic Committee is skating on thin ice in Beijing, and it's not just about the latest doping scandal. A former Olympic figure skater and the writer behind this piece in Slate accusing a famous Russian coach of child abuse both join me. Plus, Encore Casino is under new ownership, well, kind of. We're digging into the logistics behind the sale to a real estate investment trust and the big plans they have ahead. The winners were able to take the podium after today's women's free skate event after all, since gold medal favorite Kamila Valieva, who tested positive for a banned heart medication but was still allowed to compete while an investigation plays out, gave an uncharacteristically sloppy performance and came in fourth. Her team, which competes as part of the Russian Olympic Committee because the country itself is still suspended over past doping scandals, still dominated the event, claiming both the gold and silver. Now, the medal ceremony for the team figure skating event still on hold pending the investigation because Valieva helped the ROC take gold over the U.S. But some of the focus on Valieva, who's just 15 years old, has shifted to another Russian figure skating icon, her coach, Eteri Tutberidze. Her athletes have all dominated the sport for the past several years, but now some are beginning to question whether her tactics are not just effective, but also abusive. Among those making that claim is writer and longtime figure skating fan Rita Wang, who argues in a new Slate piece that Tutberidze has helped create a culture of child abuse within the sport. She joins me now, along with retired Olympic figure skater and two-time national silver medalist, Polina Edmunds. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start by throwing Rita, just taking a look at part of a pullout from your piece in the magazine, just pointing out what some of the allegations here are, that her methods are no secret. The Eteri girls, who are usually the folks who are being coached, the girls being coached by her, talk openly about not being able to drink water during competitions. They do their best to delay puberty by eating only powdered nutrients or by taking Lupron, which is a puberty blocker known to induce menopause. They are subjected to daily public weigh-ins and verbal and physical abuse, and they compete while injured, huffing smelling salts while wearing knee braces and collapsing in pain after programs. This has basically, Rita, been an open secret for quite a few years now about this coaching approach, right?
Yes, essentially, figure skating fans have long known about Eteri's methods. Every few weeks, it seems like a new interview comes out with her saying more and more egregious things, like the things I mentioned in my article.
And Polina, just to point out, from your perspective, I mean, just over the past decade, the age of the skaters competing has dropped, and the ceiling to how old you can be to continue to be a competitive skater and enjoy the sport. How has that changed in your experience over the past decade?
You know, it's crazy because 8 years ago, I was the 15-year-old competing at the Olympics, and I was only one of two. My counterpart was a Russian 15-year-old. And at that time, no matter how advanced technically I was, which in Sochi, I did have the hardest technical content of every woman there, I still finished in 9th place. And this is because the judging prioritized the second mark as well as the technical equally. And of course, competing against women many years older than I, they could bring maturity and a full package of skating that they didn't quite see with me. And that is completely flip-flopped in the last 4 to 5 years. And now every single champion and every girl that's getting all the medals is young, is a minor under the age of 18. You know, the gold medal favorite was 15. You know, the girls right now winning 16, 17. The way that the judging system has now prioritized technical has resulted in this quad fiasco of young girls before the age of puberty who are just filling their programs with quadruple jumps and not trying for components and for skating skills. It's become a jumping contest. And unfortunately, we've seen now with this case in Beijing that it's now a competition of chemistry rather than natural abilities. And if we're not Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know we all agree that we should point out that Valieva is 15 years old and that the adults around her are the ones that are responsible for whatever is or isn't happening with her, and they are still doing an investigation to find out about the past use, and that story is developing even as we are talking. Bree, can you talk about this quad? I know that we'll all become experts every 4 years when we watch the Olympics about whatever sport we love, and the development of the quad move in women's skating, when the men's skating is just only for a few years been able to accomplish this, and now it's sort of a must-do. Can you talk about what the difference is for our viewers between sort of an artistic, athletic performance versus this technical quad that has to be done? Why is that so important and dominating now?
I think that, as Polina mentioned, the scoring is really interesting. Pretty much 8 years ago, we were seeing people with more experience like Yuna Kim, Carolina Kostner getting that really high PCS mark. And it's kind of flip-flopped in the past few years to really reward skaters who have quadruple jumps. So, for example, if you look at Sasha Trusova, who won the silver medal this morning in Beijing, her program doesn't really have transitions. It doesn't have a lot of things that skaters who are more deemed as artistic would have, and yet she has a really high PCS mark and has really high transition scores. And so I think that is really interesting. And it's something skating fans have been complaining about for the past few years as to why is the scoring like this? It doesn't really make sense. If scoring were fair, the scores would look a lot different and the placements would look a lot different.
Polina, the other thing we love to do is hate the Olympic Committee we love to hate them, hate to love them. We here in Boston, we're courting them to come here. Some people were thrilled they didn't come, and it just seems there's always these confusing rules about who gets punished and who doesn't. I want to show a tweet from Sha'Carri Richardson on Twitter. She wrote, obviously she had been eliminated for using a legal substance in some states. Can we get a solid answer on the difference of her situation and mine's? My mother died and I can't run and was also favored to place top 3. The only difference I see is I'm a black young lady. Others would also add to that, saying the other difference is even though Russia isn't competing as a country, the Russian athletes are competing, and somehow there always seems to be a little thumb on the scale on their side to give them a pass, allowing Valieva to compete, even though the use was in question. What's your take on how our relationship with the Olympic Committee is? And by ours, I mean those of us who love watching the Olympics and support the athletes.
Essentially, I think the bottom line here in the situation is that no athlete, regardless of age, should get a pass for something as big as doping. We all sign the same contracts, no matter what age we are. And the Olympics is the biggest sporting event in the world. This is an adult sport. And even if minors are competing, we have to be held to the same standards. And in terms of the differences between this situation and Sha'Carri's, for one, right now, this skater is denying the use of the substance and saying it had to be an accident. And so they're doing an investigation. She is a minor, so she has protected person's rights in this contract, versus, Sha'Carri is not a minor. She did admit to the usage of using something that was against the rules, regardless of whether or not it was performance enhancing. So there's definitely differences in the situation, but I do stand with the fact that Kamila should face consequences just like every other athlete, regardless of age, and she should have been suspended and not allowed to compete at this Olympics.
Rita, it seems to me we're in a bit of I would hope, a renaissance, an awakening about the toll that being an athlete in the spotlight is taking, that so many athletes have been coming forward talking about the mental health challenges, the physical health challenges. We're closely looking at the NFL in particular about the physical cost on those people performing for us, basically, on Sundays. And now we're looking at sports like primarily gymnastics and skating and a few others where children are competing. And they don't seem to be competing for the love of the sport or for the competition. They seem to be competing for something that's greater than them, that they may not have consent or the knowledge to actually give consent. Do you think we're at a turning point, and this is a worldwide question, obviously, about how we look at young athletes competing in these high-stake events?
Well, I would say I really hope we're at a turning point as someone who not only watches figure skating, but also gymnastics and all of these other sports like tennis. I have been watching these young girls pretty much process their emotions on live television, and it's been heartbreaking. And I'm really glad that with the Olympics here, we're finally able to shine the spotlight on how much abuse there is in the sport, and how much we use these young girls for entertainment, essentially. But I don't know. My worry is that with the Olympics almost a few days going to end, I'm worried that people will forget that Kamila tested positive for this drug, and that they'll go on to the next news story. So my hope is that this is another part of a conversation about changing the culture within figure skating and other sports.
And Polina, because of the international nature of it, right? This doesn't become our story in a way, and I mean in the United States, as Rita points out, once the Olympics close, we're not going to really focus on skaters again unless the nationals, and if they start touring again and having the national competition. Yet this whole community of the skating community, the amateur skating organizations will be involved. Will there be any changes? Will there be any pushes to change the way the scoring happens, putting pressure on the Olympic Committee, putting pressure on others to bring the sport back from this technical athleticism that's almost impossible to maintain past, being 17 or 18?
Well, I think one of the biggest problems in our sport right now has been the dishonest judging, and it has really detracted from the excitement that skating brings and the recognition that athletes with longevity in their careers brings. We don't have skaters that we can follow anymore in their careers because we're just getting a conveyor belt of very young athletes every single year. And again, because of the way the technical has been pushed, a lot of the qualities that people love about figure skating, the beauty, the artistry, that's starting to be missing. And so I think if we're going to fix that and we're going to bring skating back to the sport that we all know and love, there needs to be serious changes in the judging system.
Rita, you've been following ice skating, figure skating your whole life. Do you still enjoy watching it? And you're writing about it. It's part of your career. Do you still enjoy watching and cheering on folks? Or is it a bit of a heartbreaking or bittersweet mixed emotions experience for you?
I would say I definitely have mixed emotions. There are some skaters whom I love, who I really admire. Like, for example, Japan's Wakabayashi Higuchi, who landed 2 triple axels in Beijing. I felt really lucky to be able to watch her skate and share that moment with her. But like Polina said, having the judges score her so low when she put out that skate made me really upset. And I do feel like there's something special about skating that I keep going back to every few years. But I really hope that there are massive changes within the sport, or else, I don't know, a lot of people like me are very unhappy with how it's going right now.
And Polina, are you still able to encourage folks to take up skates?
Absolutely. This is the sport I grew up with. I grew up watching. I went to the Olympics myself. I love figure skating, and I love what it can give to athletes who decide to give it a try and make it part of their lives. I just hope that young athletes in this country, as well as others, aren't discouraged by the Olympics that have just happened.
Well, we direct folks to Rita Wang's Slate piece. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Polina Edmunds, I appreciate you as well. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the Olympics this week.
Thank you.
Next up, the Encore Boston Harbor Casino is in new hands. Well, sort of. Wynn Resorts announced a $1.7 billion sale of the Everett property to real estate investment trust Realty Income. That happened this week, but as the deal stipulates, Wynn will lease the property from Realty Income, starting at an annual rate of $100 million. They plan to use the proceeds from the sale to fund development plans across the street from the casino. Those plans include a 2,000-plus car garage, a nearly 1,000-seat events venue, and a 20,000-square-foot restaurant space, all to be connected to the casino via a footbridge over Broadway. Of course, that's all at the will of the State Gaming Commission. Well, joining me to discuss what this means for the future of the casino are Jon Chesto, reporter with the Boston Globe, and Paul DeBole, political science professor at Lasell University. Welcome to both of you. I can't tell you how excited I am to talk about this, so thanks for joining us.
Sure thing.
Jon, I want to jump in with you first. Can you explain to me and our viewers what's happening here?
So it's a fairly routine, at least in the casino industry, transaction called sale-leaseback, where the company sells the real estate, that would be the land and the building, but stays in and pays rent to a new landlord. And so that's what Wynn Resorts is doing. They're obviously not going to leave. They're going to run the casino, but they've decided it makes more sense to get this cash up front. When the deal closes, it's not going to close until the end of the year, but they're going to get $1.7 billion. It's a lot of money. Rather than, and then they can retire debt. You know, they're paying essentially a mortgage on the property that they don't have to worry about anymore. They're going to have to pay rent of $100 million a year, but they must have done the numbers and realized, well, that's easier than trying to make the numbers work on this mortgage. So that's what they're doing, and they will get some money that they can then use. They're expanding. They're looking at a project in the United Arab Emirates that they need some money for, and as you mentioned, they're looking to build across the street. They're right now before the Gaming Commission with a theater, garage, restaurant space proposal and a footbridge to connect it all to the casino over Broadway. So they have expansion plans and they need the cash to pull those off.
Jon, would this be shocking to people who were involved in the process of both from the cities and towns and the argument over wherever it was and where Boston was and everything that went on? You know, I'm reading the comments in your story at the Boston Globe today, and some people were like, well, that's what they really wanted to do all along. But it sounds like to me now that this is just sort of a financial move for them to free up cash rather than maybe going to a bank and getting a loan. So
yeah, that's sort of what's going on. It's not like they're leaving town.
Right.
I think they might have had, they certainly have spent more building this than they expected to. It was that they spent $2.6 billion to develop this project. And so, the mortgages, the debt that's on the property they probably are eager to retire and start spending money on something else. I mean, of course, they didn't anticipate the pandemic, and now they're doing pretty well, but they really struggled before the pandemic, particularly with slot machines. I think they figured out the slot machine formula to attract more slots players. And now in the last few months, with the exception of January, but January is a slow month for a lot of reasons, they've sort of got their footing back again. So I don't think it'd be a shock. We've seen a lot of casino companies do it. MGM did it out in Springfield. They basically have they're sort of an affiliated MGM Growth Properties, which is a real estate company that MGM often sells their casinos to and then leases back.
Paul, what's the temperature of the casinos in the state of Massachusetts? Jon was alluding to it. You know, we're looking at data during a pandemic, and I think the most recent sort of reports I looked said they were optimistic, and clearly they're optimistic because they're doing a deal like this. How are the casinos doing against what they expected to do, and how does that look for the tax revenue for the state?
So the numbers seem to mirror, at least in terms of pattern, the revenue numbers from January of 2020, December, November 2019, with minor fluctuations because of but I mean, I believe there is cause to be optimistic. But the big problem that we have is a lack of concrete long-term data to base it.
Jon, I want to talk about this bridge that they want to run from their proposal across the street. And, we're talking about Broadway, so I don't know if it's Everett or Boston.
It's actually all Everett.
All Everett. So it's an Everett situation. And I'm always, I was joking with the producers before this that I could talk for days about public bridges being built over public roadways by private companies. All kidding aside, is there anything that you see that would be a stumbling block for the Gaming Commission to approve this? I mean, it sounds delightful to have a big venue and more parking and all that, but it's not just going to be all smooth sailing, is it?
Well, what happened was that Wynn originally said they wanted an 1,800 seat theater in that property across the street that would be connected by a walkway. And they said, they were very well aware that the casino law does not allow theaters between the size of 1,000 seats and 3,500 seats. But they said that doesn't count because this is a separate property across the street. However, the Gaming Commission is looking at it very closely. And I think Wynn is reading the tea leaves and said, well, you know what? We're just going to play it safe. And we're going to propose a 999 seat theater to stay within the under the 1,000 seat threshold. So what Wynn would love it if the Gaming Commission says that that property across the street is technically not part of the casino, not to be regulated as part of the casino. That way they can go back to the 1,800 seat proposal. But so that's really what hangs in the balance is, will the Gaming Commission decide it's going to regulate the property across the street as essentially part of the casino site? And if it does, then the casino, the law that says you can't have any theaters in a casino with more than 1,000 seats, which was put in to protect the incumbent theaters across the state who didn't want to be blindsided by casinos, which can essentially subsidize performers. So that's really, I mean, Wynn does not want to be regulated. They do not want that property to be regulated as part of the casino. And the Gaming Commission is deciding whether or not to consider it technically part of the casino. And you could argue, well, it's connected by a enclosed walkway. So even if it is technically a separate parcel and across the street, it's still essentially an arm of the casino building. So that's what's kind of playing out here at the Gaming Commission. And, that's the uncertainty. If the Wynn does not want it, and I can tell you that the theater owners would much, there are many rival theaters that are watching this closely, and they would much prefer a 999 seat theater there than an 1,800 seat theater.
Yeah, and to underscore your point for folks, casinos can generally have performers as loss leaders and pay them a lot.
They can. There are all sorts of things they can
Yeah.
do. They can buy blocks of tickets. They can offer a much bigger price, to the artist. And if you're an independent theater competing against a casino, and you talk to these folks about what Foxwood and Mohegan Sun have done to them, it's been a tough competition.
And I imagine they can also make the argument that we don't own the property that the casino's on. We own the property that the theater's on, so therefore it's a separate entity connected what may end up being a quasi-public
I mean, it'd be
footprint.
interesting to see how this leaseback just became public, so it's not necessarily being introduced into the Gaming Commission debate, but it'd be interesting to see how it does get introduced, like how it plays out.
Paul, what's the gaming world feel about we haven't got our gambling yet here in Massachusetts, and I keep meeting people who keep riding to other states around us so that they can gamble on their sports. The DraftKings of the world. Is there any concern from these brick and mortar places that the gambling we're in the middle of a sort of a culture shift or beginning of a culture shift where people won't be going to casinos as much once we start reemerging again as the pandemic subdues a little bit?
I think they're looking at online gambling, with a cautious eye. They're looking at Twin Rivers. They're looking at New Hampshire. I talk to people all the time where they get in the car on a Sunday, drive up to New Hampshire, bet on a couple of games, and watch the games. Is there a lost opportunity here in Massachusetts? Absolutely. But the question is, how do we regulate that? And how does the government tax that? We're seeing a big disparity in DraftKings versus brick and mortar casinos. And I think that's something that the legislature is going to have to deal with at some point. But again, legislature does have a tough job. They have to become experts in everything. And they regulate in one area is usually the law of unintended consequences. So they tend to be a little more deliberate in that way and try to blunt or limit the effects of unintended consequences. And if it takes a little longer for them to do it, so be it. It's better to do it right than do it right.
Jon, are you hearing, there's all these other casino developments and issues that are still in play across the state, everywhere from Martha's Vineyard to, western part of Massachusetts. Is there a feeling that there's actually a marketplace for this, that there are enough customers to make all of this worthwhile? I'm not so worried about Wynn, but there are some other smaller casinos and certainly the Native American tribes that are looking for licensing.
I think the most likely, we've seen sort of a resurgence of interest the Mashpee Wampanoag project in Taunton. And the Aquina Wampanoag also, they want to build a casino. They're working on a sort of what would be a bingo hall there in Aquina. I think Aquina, being on sort of a remote part of Martha's Vineyard, does not have a lot of appeal to a casino developer, but there's a lot of money behind the Mashpee Wampanoags from Genting, which is this global casino developer. So, the Trump administration was not keen on allowing them there. I think the tide has turned a bit for them, and the Biden administration seems more open to allowing a casino in Taunton. So I think we might very well see them. They've spent a lot of money and time trying to build that. We might see that still come to fruition. The only other place where we might see a development is in Brockton, but I think as long as Taunton remains in play, the two cities are too close. No one's going to try to compete with a tribal casino in Taunton. I do feel like we're at the point where it's pretty saturated. I mean, you can see the numbers. Every time a new casino opens in New England, everyone else's numbers take a hit a bit. I don't know how much more room there is for another one.
Of course, the issue there, of course, was with the federal recognition of the tribe. Jon Chesto, I appreciate you joining us with your expertise, and Paul DeBole as well. Thank you so much. I look forward to you updating me on this footbridge, which, of course, is the big hook for me on this story. Thanks so much for joining me. That's it for tonight, but come back tomorrow for Talking Politics. Adam Riley and his panel are going to dive into Danielle Allen leaving the race for governor and calling out the political system here in Massachusetts, plus questions of money, power, and whether they can coexist with the real change Mayor Michelle Wu has campaigned on. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thanks for watching.
New dawn.
New vibe.
New duo.
I'm looking forward to that, yeah.
Join me, Paris Alston.
And me, Jeremy Siegel.
For GBH's Morning Edition, with the local news and fresh insights you need.
To start your morning and inspire your day.
You gotta live life on the edge a little bit. We're here weekdays from 5 to 10 on 89.7 and gbhnews.org.
All right,
We got it. Let's go. It's a new dawn.
See you in the morning.